show you the last of the sets that I did for Coldesi. This one is a DTG machine, or a direct to garment. And so what it does is it prints directly on a garment, on a shirt. And it can do all kinds of different colors, like it can do light colors on top of black, which I think is amazing. But for the nail design, we're going to have one of the DTG machines, as well as some thermal effects throughout, because just of the way that all of a sudden the image appears on the clothes. It is so cool. I hope you guys are as excited as I am, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.
So I'm going to begin by drawing a little template for that t-shirt that I showed you. And the reason I'm drawing this template is just so that I have a really good idea. And then when I go to sculpt it, there's no question about what the shape is. And plus, since I'm going to be sculpting it in as few beads of acrylic as possible, I want to have that certainty of what I'm doing. After I have that little drawing done, I'm going to be wrapping the nail that's going to get the shirt with a piece of aluminum foil. And then I'm going to be grabbing my beads of acrylic, like I said, as few as possible. And I'm going to be placing them on the shirt. You want to pick them up and place them down as quick in succession as you can so that they start to cure at about the same pace. You don't want there to be really wet, very soft, very pliable sections of the shirt and then areas that are getting hard. You want them to sort of be, curing at the same rate so that when you go to pick up the shirt and wrap it around the nail, it picks up flawlessly. It still bends. It's exactly how you want it to be. So that getting that timing right can probably be the trickiest part of this part of the design. But after you have just the base of the t-shirt sculpted, I'm going to take the tip of my acrylic brush and I'm going to be carving out just a couple little details kind of as I can. So I did just the seams on the sleeves, and then I'm going to scooch my brush underneath and loosen this acrylic t-shirt away from the nail form backing. Once it's completely loose and I can pick it up, I'm going to place it on the nail and then just gently press it so it kind of conforms to the shape of the nail. You don't want it to be super tight, but you do want it to get the generalized shape from the nail underneath it. And then taking more black acrylic, I'm going to be adding a lot more of the details to this shirt. If you watched my digital heat FX nail, you would have seen all of my t-shirt detailing details before. The basic idea with making a t-shirt like this is you want to give it as much detail as possible, because otherwise there's not a whole lot going on. There's not multiple colors. There isn't that kind of making it exciting. It doesn't obviously look like a t-shirt unless you give it all of these little subtle details, like the seams around the armholes and around the collar and around the bottom hem. You have to give it the little kind of divot for the neck hole. Same thing for right around the bottom of the shirt. You have to just give it as many subtle details as you possibly can. And it may seem like, what details are in a t-shirt. You have the generalized T shape and then you're done, right? And you can leave it like that. That's fine. But if you want to go through and do these little extra bits, I highly recommend it, especially on the black shirt, because if you're ever trying to take a picture of a black cat, black, something that's just straight black does not photograph very well. It doesn't have that awe factor. It doesn't have as much, it doesn't catch the light. So when you're doing something like this, the more details you can add to it, the better. Just make sure it slides on the nail. And then after you have that, you can just set it to the side. And we're going to be drawing a little template for our DTG machine. So I'm going to kind of make a little box, almost like a little garage for the shirt to fit into. And so this needs to be wider than the nail because the t-shirt wraps around the sides of the nail. So it has to be able to go around that. So you have to have the machine where there is space on the three sides of the nail. So it can be attached near the cuticle, but you need to have that opening go up and over where it doesn't touch the nail at all on the sides or on the front. I'm going to be sculpting all of the pieces of my machine with white acrylic. If any of these shapes after you've sculpted them are not correct and something is just wrong, you can resculpt them. You can redraw your template. However, that's very frustrating, and so make sure you double check your sizing. Like I showed you, I held my nail tip up to my piece of paper when I was drawing my template just to make sure that it looked like to be the right size. It would be the right size. The more little double checks you can do ahead of time, the better. If drawing templates like this is something you've never done, if you find it to be overwhelming or daunting or scary, I have a templates live class that I always recommend whenever I draw a template because it goes through all the basics. It goes through all of my little things that pop into my head as I'm sculpting and drawing templates, because most of the time I have these little notions that run through my brain as I'm working, and I sometimes forget to share them with you in the voiceover because it's not fresh in the moment. But these live classes that I have, several of them that are just available anytime, I am sort of speaking what comes to my brain on a continuous run right through working on things. And so you get a much more clear view of what, what I do, what I think of, what I consider when I'm sculpting and creating these things. You also get a chance to see how long it takes me because it is a live video. Everything is done, right there. And so you get a much clearer idea of how long I actually spend on each of these little pieces. So after you have all of your pieces sculpted, then as you saw, I took a file and I gently straightened out all of their edges, and now I'm going to use some nail glue and a couple tweezers, and I'm going to be gluing the pieces together. That one tweezers I had, has anybody ever had this where your tweezers gets bent and it no longer can close at the very end of it? Very frustrating. Anywho, that one didn't work for me. So we're going to be gluing these pieces together. Kind of slow and steady wins the race with that. You don't want to rush the nail glue. Sometimes nail glue, you set something down in it and it just attaches and it grips really fast. Sometimes it takes its sweet old time. So if you are running into a case where it's seeming extra slow, one thing that can be kind of hard is that the longer you sit there, the more you kind of relax, and then your pieces don't end up exactly how you put them. So sometimes it helps if you just kind of, after it's glued just enough, I put a little bit of acrylic on the inside and it kind of holds it so that it doesn't actually go anywhere. And then we're going to glue the front of our machine on. As you can see, it is far from perfect. And that's the one that's being difficult. Definitely not perfect. There are pieces that are longer than others. There is, gaps in certain areas. All of that stuff is just fine. Don't let it worry you. As you continue working on this and sculpting it and adding different layers to it, it'll all work itself out in the end. The first thing I'm going to do to correct the little issues is I'm going to smooth out that big gap that was right at the front of the machine, just to make sure that piece was secured on, because with that huge gap, the piece on the front was not very well attached. So that first one makes a big difference to make sure it's not going to fall apart as you're working on a different area. And then I'm going to take and just add a lot more acrylic all the way around this machine, all over the place. As you're working on adding all of this extra acrylic, use a fast setting acrylic if you do have one available to you. This would be the monomer. So you want to use a fast setting monomer, because if you use a slow setting monomer, especially when you're filling in those gaps, your acrylic is going to be a little softer, a little wetter, and it's going to take a lot longer to reach that kind of putty, pliable Play-Doh type of a stage. And so you're going to set your piece down and it's going to just sort of fall right through the hole. So if you have a fast setting monomer that's going to hold its shape a little bit better, you'll fill in those gaps much easier. I'm going to fill in some of the gaps on the inside of the machine as well. And then I'm going to take my e-file and I'm going to file this whole thing so it's nice and smooth. The biggest benefit of going through and, filing it afterwards is that as long as you have an e-file, if you're going to do this with a hand file, it's maybe a little less exciting because it's just a little more tedious. But if you have that availability and you have the e-file, then you can just smooth it all out and look so much better. Unfortunately, I did miss recording a few steps of the process along the way. Again, I apologize. Painting the logo, though, you will see again, so it's not a huge deal. Just attach the machine to the nail. If you want to see how I attach machines to a nail like this, I would highly recommend going back through and watching the Digital Heat FX video. I can put a link to that in the description box below because that one has a very similar machine. So if you want to see that, definitely look at that. So now back to my black t-shirt that's going to be sliding in and out of that machine we just made. I'm going to be painting the Coldesi logo, the Coldesi globe, with yellow, 2 shades of red, and an aqua. And we're going to paint those 4 quadrants of the globe, cure that, and then I'm going to paint a circle of a medium gray going right around the globe. And then after that's done, I'm going to fix any of my little, any of the little errors with black paint, as well as adding the grid that goes across the front of the globe. So I'm going to create a little outline between the different colors and the gray, and then also go around the gray and just smooth out that line. I let it get a little out of hand just to make sure that it was the right shape. The great thing with doing this on top of a black t-shirt is that as you are cleaning up those lines, the black gel paint versus the black acrylic do not have any color difference. So you won't be able to see all of those lines that you're fixing. Add those lines, creating the grid across the front of the globe. Painting this globe I found super relaxing, just how straightforward and simple and repetitive the pattern was. Things like that I absolutely love. So I love painting zebra print for the same reason. It's so straightforward to me. I'm now going to be applying a layer of gel base coat over the front of the globe, making sure I go over it a little bit so it completely covers that. You don't have to do the whole shirt, but just make sure it covers the image. Then after that's cured, I'm going to press some black thermal powder into the inhibition layer of the gel base coat. So it's a nice sticky base coat, and it's just going to grab that thermal powder, and it's going to make it so that the image effectively disappears. And then before I do anything else, I'm just going to leave the powder exactly how it is. I'm going to be adding a little bit of a highlighting and a little more detailing to the rest of the t-shirt. This is with acrylic paint. So this isn't gel paint. This is with an acrylic product that is, it just applies a little smoother over the top of the acrylic. And then I'm going to take some gel top coat, matte top coat, and I'm going to apply that over my t-shirt. I'm going to carefully apply it over the thermal powder so I don't disrupt it and make it so that it goes away, so you have a nice clean image that appears and disappears. Now I'm going to sculpt a second t-shirt. This one is going to go for the thumb. So I'm going to do a white t-shirt this time. Actually, no, not the thumb, the index finger. But I'm going to do a white t-shirt just to show some variety. And we're going to use that same template as before and just sculpt your shirt. Again, try to keep it so that you're using as few beads as possible and as close together. This white t-shirt was the first one I sculpted, so my technique considerably improved over the process of sculpting the various ones. But then I'm going to press that over the top of that index fingernail. This nail was not wrapped in foil because this t-shirt is going to be there permanently. And then I'm going to sculpt all of those extra added details onto this shirt as well. As you are sculpting this shirt, just like with the last one, make sure that you are trying to add in as many details. The more details you can add, the better. Keep in mind though, you do want to leave as kind of as smooth of a space as possible right across the very front of the t-shirt where the image is going to be. That'll make it easier to paint and add that. So, don't go too crazy and say add any wrinkling across the front of the shirt. That would just make an unnecessary complication. It may look really nice in the end, but I don't believe it would be worthwhile to try to work over the top of that. So we're going to be adding those little details on the sides, add the collar to the shirt. The more you can add, the better. If it seems like it's getting to be, too much, you can certainly simplify it. Once you're happy with the way the t-shirt looks all over the place, it's got a nice, strong detail. It looks good. You may consider adding a little bit of clear acrylic to the underside just to add a little bit more strength. If it seems like it's, strong and fine, you probably don't need to, especially since white acrylic is very strong. So you may be okay, but if that's something where you're just a little bit unsure, that would give you an extra layer of security. So now we're going to be taking and doing all of the detail paint for the image on the front of the t-shirt. For this one, I'm actually going to be using acrylic paint instead of gel. The reason I used gel previously for that Cold Essie globe was because I had those specific colors picked out that matched Cold Essie's coloring, and I wanted to make sure that I used those ones consistently throughout all of the sets that I made for them. But on the front of this shirt, we are going to be painting a really cool image that Cold Essie provided me with. That is this woman, and she's got all of these oranges surrounding her, and it's just a really glamorous, fun shot, and it shows a bunch of different color and it's very vibrant. I fell in love with it immediately. I was like, oh, that's the one I'm painting. So we're going to be doing those little details on her, adding the shading. If you are not used to painting with acrylic paint, it is very different than painting with gel paint. And so if it's, like I said, if it's not something that you're comfortable with, you haven't done it before, you're unsure, maybe stick with gel paint, because it's kind of like using acrylic paint versus oil for canvases. Gel paint is much more like painting with oils because it doesn't dry until you're ready for it. Much like oil painting, you have a lot of working time. With acrylic paint, you have almost no working time. It's really quick, So if that's something that you have not tried before and you haven't really done it, maybe practice a little bit or just go for it. Just keep in mind that you have to consistently be keeping your paint wet, getting your brush washed out. You don't want to leave any color in the brush for any longer than you need to. Going to be adding the little details. She's got some yellow on her eyes as well as some orange. So I love glamorous makeup just on myself in general. I love color. I love bright stuff. So when I saw this one and she had the, the multicolored eyeshadow and all of the fruit around her, I was pretty excited. We're going to be adding her eyebrows. As you're doing all of this paint, as you can see, I am doing some paint mixing on my thumb. That is perfectly safe if you're using acrylic paint. You do not want to do any kind of color mixing or touching if you're doing gel products. So if you're doing a gel paint, do not mix them on your thumb. Use a palette. It can be something as simple as a piece of aluminum foil. That is a great palette for gel polish because you can just pick it up and throw it away, and you can use teeny tiny little pieces. And aluminum foil is something that a lot of people have by their nail products anyway because it is used to soak off gel polish oftentimes. And so if that's something that you would be needing, that would be a good alternative. I'm going to be adding the finishing little details on my portrait, and then I'll go through and I'll add the finishing little details on the oranges as well. As you're detailing all of these different things, I always say this, but you can simplify it or you can make it more detailed. If you are doing a set and you just want to make a cool t-shirt, it could be whatever you like. I was really happy with the way that her portrait turned out. I loved how similar it was to the photo that Cold Essie provided me with. And like I said, I love just the general vibes of it. So after you have her done, I am going to be writing Cold Essie above the image on the shirt. This is something that I have done a lot of times in the previous videos. And so if you watched it before, you'll pretty much know the process. We're going to start with an E right in the center, so right above her nose, and then the S, and then the I. Whenever I am doing any writing on something, I like to start in the middle and then work my way out. Because I am doing this one and it's going to have the globe on the end of it, I'm not starting in the middle of the word, I'm starting in the middle of the image. So I'm going to start where I feel like it would be the center. And then I can kind of balance that out with how far I place the globe to the side. And then I'm going to use my gel to add the colors inside the globe, just like I used the same colors on the t-shirt. Again, keep it the same, keep those colors, the ones I used throughout the whole set. Add the other little crisscrossy lines on the globe. This one's much tinier, so they get covered up. The background color gets covered up a little bit more. Apply some matte gel top coat. When you are applying a gel top coat over 3D art, make sure you apply as thin a coat as possible so that it doesn't flood any of your 3D details. I usually try to avoid using a gel top coat on top of 3D art, but if you use a gel product like that little bit of gel polish I used to make the little Cold Essie globe, you do need to use gel top coat. On the middle and pinky nails, they are already painted black, and then I'm going to apply just a little coat of a blooming gel, and then using a bright pink, a bright yellow, and a bright teal, or blue, I suppose. I'm going to be adding just a little swirl across the top of this. This whole machine, this whole set, everything just seemed like a splash of color that all of a sudden, just like I said before, it just kind of appears. So I'm going to have this little kind of soft swirl going on in the background, and then I'm going to apply a layer of gel base coat. And then after that layer of gel base coat has cured, I'm going to black this nail out with more of that thermal powder. Again, pressing the powder into the inhibition layer. You don't want to rub it. You want to really just start by pressing it. It is going to seem like it's taking a lot of powder, but it is required if you really want to black out the nail. So just press, press, press. And then after you have it where it's pretty well applied, you can't really see it anymore, you can just go through and rub over the top of it to smooth it out. But when you're applying that first initial layer, make sure that you do just apply it with a pressing motion. And then a layer of gel top coat. And that one's all done. For the last nail in this set, I'm going to be showing you how I painted the DTG G4 logo. So this is the same logo that is painted on the front of the machine that I showed you in the beginning of the video. This is going to be just a very basic, straightforward logo copying example. And it's one of those things where my favorite thing to do whenever I am waiting at a restaurant or anywhere basically, and I have a piece of paper and I have a pen, is I will copy their logo of whatever establishment it is that I am sitting at. I remember years ago I was in a restaurant and I was copying down the logo, and it was a pretty fancy affair. It had the words in it, and then it had like these leaves that wrapped around it, and then it said, I don't know, like Modern Kitchen or something underneath it. But there was a lot to the logo. It's not like a simple one that's just a couple letters or a simple image, but it was a more complex logo. And I was just doodling it on top of my to-go box. And our waiter was very surprised, very impressed. And I was like, well, I do this all the time. And I never really even considered the fact that I do it all the time until that moment, because it was somebody called attention to it, the fact that I was copying a logo. But I realized that is something that just the fact that I do it all the time is so helpful to being able to replicate a logo, replicate a style of font that a company can hand me, or that I want to do just, to help further the nail design that I'm working on. So if you ever find yourself with a pen and I'm holding a pen, I just dropped it, a pen and a couple of extra spare minutes, and you're sitting somewhere, stop looking at TikTok, put your phone down. Unless you're watching my video, then you can watch it and just forget what I'm saying. No, but stop watching your videos, stop looking at Instagram, stop doing whatever you're doing. Copy a logo, or somebody's got a t-shirt on that's in front of you, and you don't want to make them uncomfortable because you're copying them, but discreetly just see something and do it. But if you are somebody that wants to learn how to replicate a font or a logo, copy down every logo you come across. You buy something new from the store and you're eating cereal and you've never seen this cereal box, or you've never drawn this cereal box logo, grab a piece of paper, and as you're eating your breakfast in the morning, copy their logo. I can't even stress how helpful that would be if in your art altogether. It's muscle memory, it's repetition, and learning how to draw these different things. Even if you know, it's quick. Even if it's 2 minutes a day, that's a huge benefit. And I highly recommend doing that. Just kind of, it gets to be habit, and you know what? It's really fun. It's highly enjoyable. At least if you're an artsy person, that's like a great pastime. So now I'm going to be finishing off my logo. So I have DTG Digital, which is very hard for my mouth to say at the moment, at least, DTG Digital. And then I'm going to be writing G4, and that's the model of the machine. So we've got the DTG. It's all done in black and white. The great thing with this nail having a background of a straight white gel polish is that the white gel paint, I can go back through and I can clean up my lines really easily and kind of have a little bit of a eraser style, if you will, because if anything goes kind of awry, you can always just fix it with a little bit of extra white paint. After I have G4 painted with a bright green, I'm going to be adding skinny little white lines across it, 3 of them, and then apply a layer of gel top coat, and that nail is all done. And with that nail being done, this whole set's done. So here's how it looks when it's cold without the t-shirt. Then you can grab the shirt and it'll slide in, and if you press it just a little firmer, it'll actually hold itself in place. I'm gonna pull it out just a little bit so that we can see this magnificent color change. Otherwise, there's the DTG G4 nail. I'm so in love with how rich and how vibrant this design is, just with the black and the white and then all of the bright colors. Add a little bit of heat and there you go, the magic happens. I love the thermal surprises with this. I love any nail design where it surprises you, where there's something that you weren't expecting and then bam, there it is. And this one definitely delivers that wow factor. I hope you guys like it, and I will see you all next time. Bye.